Thank you very much, Prof. Talking about M-Pesa, I think we have also adopted that one in Swaziland because now we also have mobile money, which works in a similar way. But you just took me back to one of the innovations that comes from Africa, the cardiopad, which was made in Cameroon by a young person delivering medical first aid medicine to people in rural areas. Just a question on how exactly should we support these young people? What structures or what interventions should our government be putting so that these young people actually do come up with these innovations and we actually implement them at the highest level of benefit?
So that's a very important point because to get from that stage of development now into a high product that can easily be adopted, you need a certain type of policy direction. And I think some of the discussions we have about the constraints that young entrepreneurs face is precisely that. How can we then overcome this barrier? First of all, I think that if the idea itself is very strong, and I believe in very strong ideas that have been well thought through, if the idea is very strong, the government will come on board. So very often we hang in between. It's very good to innovate, it's very nice, but it's not at a level where it will overcome the resistance of government to come on board to help push this through. Now, if the commercial intention of the innovation is very strong, it will almost always inevitably override the regulations and the government rules that don't allow it to work. And at the same time, it will also call in the government, this time not by you going to convince them of the need to come, but they see the output that is coming out of it, and they are forced to do it. So if you look at what has happened in the tech industry, that's precisely the point, because the government can't control it. It's not easy to, stop Uber type of technology, for instance, from taking root in even a place like South Africa. You can kill all the drivers if you want, but the thing is that it's a technology that has introduced something very innovative, and that innovation gives a product that gives a benefit that tells you that the traditional way in which we were operating taxis doesn't work or doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying necessarily that Uber is a good example, but that type of technology, because now nobody stops it. So it's actually the regulator now trying to catch up with his rules to make sure that it works. And this is the type of things that I think the innovations that we should be bringing in the marketplace. So let's not complain too much about government. They will do what they have to do.
That's true.
Sometimes they also have their own objectives, and not necessarily the objective of helping the entrepreneur, although that may be there. So I think that the young entrepreneurs that are coming up should have the room to think in terms of critical innovations that are earth-shattering. And when it's earth-shattering, nothing stops it.
That is very true. So in terms of now other countries that you've been to in Africa, how are they inspiring young people to be innovative? Because I'm thinking when you are supposed to come up with an idea that is earth-shattering, as you put it, you have to have some kind of exposure or some kind of way of thinking that is beyond being normal. And for an SME that is already starting up, what needs to change within that entrepreneur to say that now I can go forward with my idea, I can implement it with regardless of all those regulations that are existing presently?
So in the continent, the exciting thing is that you see growth everywhere. And it's in the faces of the people, in the countries that I visit, in all the institutions that I go to. It so happened that we Africans have actually been miseducated so much and for so long that we've even lost the confidence in our ability to do things for ourselves. The last golden generation in the world was produced by black people. It wasn't done by any other group, it was black people. the structures, and our ancestors left a lot of evidence of this for us. We produced the last golden generation without finance. There wasn't anything like the current financial system. So when you hear people talking about finance being the most important constraint, it always beats my imagination. You go back to the Nile Valley. We didn't have any financial system. Trade happened. And we have more complicated trade and more complicated economic systems. We left technologies that are far more complicated than what we have produced today. And even with our state of knowledge now, they haven't been able to replicate what was left at the Nile Valley. So for me, it is for the African to go back to where he left off the last time, which is to remember what we know already. And that knowledge is already inbuilt in our DNA. We actually don't need to do anything other than a talk like this that reminds you, and then it fires your brain in different directions other than the traditional paths that your brain has been wired to go through. And once these nerves are fired in that direction, you will begin to awake to something that you know already and begin to do it. I don't have any specific, things to share with my brothers and sisters other than to remind them that we have been a great culture. We have done it before. We are here to do it again. And let's just do it.